love to tailgate, we love to eat, and we love to have some fun too. So
I don't believe I've missed a homecoming since 1963.
Every time on the walk out to the field before the game, I make sure to touch the pyramid.
The real message is coming together.
Hey Salukis, I'm Jeff Gleam, Executive Director of the SIU Alumni Association, and welcome to another edition of Saluki Sleuths. In this episode, we're going to be taking a deeper look into the traditions of homecoming and how they've evolved. Some you may be familiar with, some you may not. Here's Anna Toomey with more.
A raging crowd, a good game, the sounds of proud Salukis. No matter how far away they are or how long it's been, Salukis come back for homecoming.
I'm really excited that we get to keep doing this because it's a tradition that we should keep alive, and I think that we will for many, many years to come. My name is Larry Hunter. I'm an alumni of the Marching Salukis. I was in Marching Salukis from 80 to 84.
Larry is the man behind a Marching Salukis icon. Once a year for homecoming, he rolls out the rhythm on wheels.
Each year I bring the carts out. I'll bring them to the field again this year. We'll install the drums on them. The other drummers that come back will help me install them. And
these carts have had a long journey.
they started using the carts in the early 60s and they continued that until the early 90s. So the carts had been kind of disregarded after that.
Larry says the drum carts disappeared completely after they were retired in favor of over-the-shoulder straps.
I was in a homecoming game with some other alums, and we were playing these drums that the university had provided us for homecoming, and we all had asked, where are the drum carts? Where are the drum carts? Nobody seemed to really know. And
there was one man who knew. Former Marching Salukis band director Mike Haynes. He directed Larry to the woods behind the marching band practice area just past Saluki Stadium.
This was where I found them. They were covered in branches back here, and trees were growing up in them, and they were really in bad shape. It was a cold winter day when I dug these carts out. You know, I don't mind telling you, it was a little emotional seeing them like that. But I also saw that they could be repaired and I could help bring those carts back, and we could use them, and we'll continue to use them for many years at homecoming.
Larry made this discovery back in the early 2000s. He was determined that these pieces of Marching Saluki history see the light of day again.
I was able to pull the carts out, take them back home, restore the carts, shine them up, put new wheels on them, and unfortunately the drums that were on the carts originally were all gone. There was some paint missing, and it had been painted over the years a burgundy maroon color. So I had to strip all that off. I had to use a sandblaster with walnut shells and clean all the old paint off and strip the rest that I couldn't.
Larry says it took him 6 months to find replacement pieces and do the repair work.
We brought them back to homecoming a few years back, and we've had them there ever since.
What Larry didn't know was how much this simple show of Saluki pride would mean to his fellow bandmates.
People that played other horns and instruments in the band, they come to me and they say, I'm so glad those carts are back.
It has so much history. It was part of the what I call a classic Marching Saluki band.
Gary Butler is a former saxophone player for the Marching Salukis.
I live in Atlanta. I graduated 30 years ago. Yeah, 30 years ago to this year, class of 92. My mother and father, both, they were grad students.
Gary returns to Carbondale every year to pull the rehabbed drum carts at homecoming.
You know, you're seen out there pulling the cart, and you got to keep rhythm. You can't pull it too fast or too slow. It's got to be just right, so the drummers that are playing behind you can, can play correctly.
Long before the drum carts are pulled out for the halftime show, the football players have completed their own tradition, touching the pyramid outside Saluki Stadium.
Everybody kind of has that tradition of, they tap the champion's tag, or, they rub the lion's head or whatever. And, the pyramid has kind of been our deal. You're on your victory walk into the stadium, and, it's tap it.
Every time on the walk out to the field before the game, I make sure to touch the pyramid.
The tradition goes back decades, but not every player knows the story behind the pyramid. It was once the final resting place for SIU's first ever live Saluki mascot, King Tut. When King Tut passed away in the early 1950s, he was buried under this pyramid. But at the time, it was located at Saluki football's former home, McAndrew Stadium, which was up by the Student Center. When Saluki Stadium was built in 2010, the pyramid was moved to its current location. But what about King Tut? It's a Saluki rumor his bones were excavated and reburied under the new location. There's one woman that knows for sure, Dee Lingle Ittner, whose father was the founder of the Saluki mascot.
And let's go under the bricks, and let me tell you that there are no bones, because his tenure up on the hill would have meant that they would have all gone to soil and just powdery remains. So they took some soil and some powdery remains from the top of the hill, the old McAndrew Stadium, and brought it down to the new Saluki Stadium at the south entrance.
Past players who have came through and touched that pyramid, I think it's big. It's kind of just the tradition of past and present players going through and touching that pyramid and going out and putting a great effort on the field and repping the Southern Illinois Saluki name on their chest.
Honoring the past and hopeful for the future embodies the tone of SIU homecomings. Alumnus and former Alumni Association Executive Director Ed Berger would know. He says he hasn't missed a homecoming in almost 60 years.
My name is Edward Berger, and I'm a graduate of Southern Illinois University, class of 1970. I recall my first homecoming. It was fall of 1963. Back then, homecoming was a little more formal in some respects than it is now. For instance, I remember going to the ball game on Saturday afternoon, and most of the students had suits on.
Ed was living at House of Troy, and student enrollment was almost 17,000.
It was an influx of the baby boomers from World War II and so forth.
Many of the same homecoming traditions we see today were also part of Ed's first SIU homecoming experience more than 50 years ago.
We always had the parade. That was a Saturday morning, led by the Marching Salukis. Back then in '63, the Marching Salukis, that was an all-male band.
In Ed's time, there was a lot going on in the world, including the Vietnam War.
One of major influxes of students probably was in '67, '68, when the Vietnam men started coming home with their GI Bills. And they were a big part of homecoming. They, they were more mature. They came in, they provided leadership.
Ed says it was a time of independent thinkers and unrest on campus.
I got here in '63. By '64 and '65, the country was getting entrenched into Vietnam. By '65 and '66, some of the students were getting drafted from campus. I recall a lot of students, we were waiting that night to find out what our draft number was, whether we were going to be drafted away from SIU. But even through all of that, homecoming still had great value for the institution.
Ed remembers students in the community going all out with their homecoming house and window decorations. Dozens of alumni would arrive in Carbondale via train. These photos from 1967 show an excited group reuniting for homecoming.
When you drove around town, you saw the decorations, you realized that everybody was embracing Southern Illinois University. It's bigger than winning a football game or going to the NIT and winning a national championship.
Ed says homecoming brings a boost to the entire Southern Illinois region.
Probably the biggest challenge, and it still is, as I recall, but was trying to find places to stay. I know alumni were staying as far away as Mount Vernon in some of the motels, Paducah. You could not get a room here. And it really, I think, cemented a lot of the loyalty that some of our alums feel today.
Sean Cooney appreciates that loyalty. He's a young alum that helps plan entertainment and events for current homecomings.
My name is Sean Cooney. I'm an assistant director in the Office of Student Engagement. I've been on campus for 9 years now. And then coming down here, it really is a different breed of pride. I think there's a lot of attachment to the university. The university is being a Saluki is such tied intrinsically to who you are once you've attended the university that you really feel a bond with it. And that's one of the reasons I chose to stay around, is because I really felt connected to the area and the community and the university itself.
The biggest homecoming tradition of all is Saluki pride. Sometimes it's preserving history. Sometimes it's honoring history. Salukis come home to remember.
The real message is coming together, coming back for homecoming and being together as a group again.
It's about what this institution can do, how it can take a young man or a young woman, 17, 18 years old, and totally turn their life around.
Well, that wraps up another edition of Saluki Sleuths. I hope you enjoyed this special edition of the homecoming traditions. I want to thank all of our university experts and special guests who contributed to this episode. Keep those ideas coming, and until we meet again, go Dogs!